there's a kernel of truth in an awful lot of what he says, but he then takes that kernel of truth and he uses it to completely blow up entire systems. So he wants to be kind of USAID as for one thing. Like, there is a kernel of truth in that there are inefficiencies. There's a kernel of truth in that there may have been some corruption in there.
A warm welcome to another episode of Policy on the Go, coming to you from Green Growth TV. I'm Tony Ogubanjo. It's been less than a month into President Trump's second term, and a wave of executive orders, sweeping policy shifts and legal battles are rapidly reshaping the federal government and the global politics as well. These moves have thrown the climate efforts and geopolitics into turmoil, dismantling key initiatives and reversing years of progress. With changes happening at such a rapid pace, it can be quite difficult to keep track of their full impact. So today we'll be keeping tabs and breaking down some of the decision-making systems of Trump that is making the biggest waves in the international system, how they affect climate policy, global cooperation, and of course the most vulnerable communities. With all the stakes on ground, the big question is if Trump's action is a course correction or catastrophic setback for the planet. While you have a think on that, we have some experts on the program to share their insights on this issue. First, we have Dr. Prachi Jain, founder, strategist, and consultant at Corporate Sustainability, and Christopher Caldwell, CEO, United Renewables. Thank you all so much for joining. How are you doing today? I'll start with you, Christopher.
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak, Tony. It's much appreciated.
Thank you so much. All right, so let's get started. I'll first of all start with looking at Trump's first few weeks in office. He has frozen billions of dollars in climate spending and clean energy, even despite orders from about 2 federal judges instructing agencies to release the money. So first of all, what do you think are the potential long-term impacts of this move by Trump? Do you think it will cripple the global systems and the climate goals that we have?
No, well, first thing to note is that this is significantly worse than it was in 2017. We've had 33 executive orders, and they have rolled back just about all the progress that we've made in the US over the last 10 years. The big kind of headlines: he has stopped EV charging infrastructure. He's taken out offshore winds. He's done an awful lot of damage. There's no doubt. But I think one of the big ironies of all of this is on his drill baby drill is that the US is at capacity. Like, it is producing as much oil and gas as it possibly can, and that's not me just saying it. That's Darren Woods, the CEO of ExxonMobil. But on the larger question of whether this is going to be kind of a catastrophic issue for global climate action, I don't believe so. Like, the world is significantly larger than the US. Others will step up, and I'm sure we'll get into that later on. And if we kind of cast our mind back to the last Trump administration, a significant amount of decarbonization continued in the US. There's big parts of the US that are benefiting from the Inflation Reduction Act. There's big parts of the US that firmly believe in climate action. And we've had, last time out, we had quite a lot of action continued to happen in spite of, and really kind of people rallied around a community last time out, and hopefully it'll happen again. Now, it might not happen under the banner of climate change, but it could very well happen under the banner of competitiveness. Because once this infrastructure is built, it is then free energy from here on out. A lot of states are understanding that. Even like now, Texas has overtaken California as the #1 producer of green energy in the US. Texas, they're not a bunch of sandal-wearing hippies, far from it. They're pragmatic people who enjoy who like energy. They're building a lot of renewable energy because they see it is an important economic step forward. So I do think carbonization will continue. I do think others will step into the gap that the US leaves. could talk about this for a lot longer, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So let me come to you, Dr. Prachi. Of course, Christopher has said, and it's very true, the world is bigger than the US. So how do you think other nations can successfully take up the gap that might just be left under this Trump administration? How do you think other nations can come into place and fill that void?
Thank you very much and good afternoon. Namaste. Um,
Namaste.
See, it is a very collaborative effect, and the decisions that so far have been taken by President Trump, are more or less individualistic. I do agree with Christopher stating that it is not the path wherein you can stop deregulation. Having said that, despite US being the biggest funder in terms of the climate resilient activities, in terms of providing economic subsidies and other benefits to the nations, it might impact the nations to a great level. But having said so, when other nations collaborate and come together, there could be a legal framework wherein they are imposing some kind of sanctions to the nations who are deregulating or derailing the path of the climate action. Once they can impose certain level of said, let's say not even the sanctions, let's talk about some kind of penalties which can to my mind, which to some it can so disappoint or dysregulate the entire process of uh, taking back the policies that Trump is doing in the present scenario. It would to some extent stop the motivation of further derailing the process. Apart from the legal experts, they really need to have a global dialogue in terms of establishment of soft powers which amongst the nations. They have to engage in dialogue and have to create forums and mechanisms which talk about a lot of soft power, which motivates the nation to take the process forward, and whatever the damage is being done by one nation going behind the climate strategies, they can take it forward and can cover up the damage that has been done by the other nations which are not the part of the entire agreement process.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Prachi. So let's staying with you. Let's look at some of the reactions from a lot of people. Some activists have described Trump's actions as inhumane treatment because his moves, obviously, they mainly prioritize political and economic agendas over the lives, and some have said even the dignity of vulnerable populations. So first of all, do you think his policies are justified, especially to the benefit of the American people? Or do you agree that his measures are inhumane and they're not forward-looking?
See, I would agree to a certain part of it, and I would disagree to this certain part. What I disagree to the part is that they're inhumane. Trump's
Okay.
policies are very clear. He wants to work on America first. He wants to bring the nation back on the path of development, on the progress path, which he has been witnessing over the years. Now, coming back to the second part of the question, wherein are these policies justified? To some extent, yes. To some extent, no. Because if you are not looking at the short term impact, you will not be in a position to strengthen your nation in the long term. Any long term process would come into effect once the short term irregularities are being taken care of. Of course, there will be a lot of problems in terms of adjustment within the vulnerable communities within the nation or outside the geopolitical system, which the other nations are a part of, or America and the multiple nations are a part of. So, to take care of that, it is very difficult to say whether the part of it is correct or not. It lies in between somewhere. I agree to some part of it that America first needs. He is witnessing a lot of unemployment within the nation. There is a lot of distress. There is a lot of activities which have not been happening in the earlier past. So to take care of them and bring a curve on them, it is very essential for the leader to take care of the short-term shortcomings so that he can make the nation impactful, powerful, successful, and employed in the longer run. So it is a mixed reaction to the question that you're talking. To some extent, it
Yeah.
is a yes that it is a short-sighted approach, but once you take care of the short-sighted approach, it might be successful or it will be successful in the long run. Thank you.
All right. Let me throw that same question to you as well, Christopher. Do you also think that Trump's policies are not justified, or they are justified, looking at his pro-American policies, especially considering that obviously America is going to benefit more from this? So what are your thoughts on that as well? Leeching onto what Dr. Prachi said.
Yeah, I would actually push back a little bit against what Dr. Prachi said there, in that I think it's possibly the most. It's a very kind interpretation of President Trump's policies. I'd be far more negative about what the actual motivations behind what he's doing are. I don't particularly think this is for the good of all America. I don't think America First is it's. He's very focused on trying to make cuts to give himself space to be making tax cuts, which only benefits a particular sector of society. If he, I don't know how hard how much force you want to be going into the ins and outs of policy.
You're very free to go into it, of course. That's what we're here for. So we want to hear the truth, of course.
Great, cool. Yeah, at heart, we have a property developer, a New York property developer there, in power, who is looking at maximization of wealth. If you have a look at just calling out, arguably like corruption here. Like if you release a meme coin, a Trump meme coin, in the days leading up to you taking office, and you're personally enriched by billions from this, and it gives the potential for large amounts of capital to go into your own pocket as a result of this. You have to look at it in that type of context. What are the personal motivations of the people in power? I think a large amount of the shock and awe that's been going on here isn't particularly to do with policy. It's to do with confusion. It's to do with, if you look back at the first Trump term, and you have Bannon, who was describing their plan. Their plan of action, their plan of trying to get policy through. They said they wanted to flood the zone, and flooding the zone meant trying to keep on putting out as much information as you could, trying to keep people off balance. So you have one shocking announcement after next shocking announcement, next shocking announcement. So attention is continually focused upon today's news, and you forget about what shocking happened yesterday. And all the time under the surface, you have appointments going on where he's consolidating power. And I think fundamentally what he's talking about is there's a kernel of truth in an awful lot of what he says, but he then takes that kernel of truth and he uses it to completely blow up entire systems. So he wants to be kind of USAID as for one thing. Like there is a kernel of truth in that there are inefficiencies. There's a kernel of truth in that there may have been some corruption in there at small parts. But if you have a look at the good that has been achieved, both from America's point of view and from the rest of the world's point of view, the last 50 years of USAID being in place, it is unquestionably a good thing. If you're talking about the Department of Health, if you're talking about the Department of Education, he says that there may be some sort of like woke agendas going on in the Department of Education. That maybe there may be a kernel of truth in there. That doesn't mean you blow the whole thing up. If you're not looking for power, you work with Congress, you work with the other branches of government to try and make long-standing reform. If power is your entire motivation, you just do executive orders. You don't worry about the other branches of power, and you go and do exactly what he's doing. So I don't think that there is an overall. I think his motivation is about trying to consolidate his own power, as opposed to trying to look after great swaths of the population. So.
Thank you so much for that very deep and interesting perspective, Christopher. And just on your thoughts on the USAID, I'm definitely coming to that. But before that, still looking at Trump's moves and all of that, what some people will say that the deregulation boosts jobs and the economy. So first of all, do you think that looking at the fact that some of his supporters will say that what he's doing is going to boost jobs for the people and also the economy, does that justification hold up, or does it still ignore ignore the long-term financial and environmental cost of climate inaction. So what do you have to say on that particular aspect as well?
Sure. I think okay. If we're talking particularly on the environmental side, okay, deregulation in itself, it depends what you're trying to deregulate. There's some things that really should never be deregulated. Like, for example, financial services. If you deregulate financial services, you get another financial crisis. You give bankers enough rope, they will always go and do this to you. History has always told us this. If you're talking about particularly on the climate side, for every dollar that was put in under the Inflation Reduction Act, $4 of the economic benefit has come into the U.S. economy. You have like people like Keir Starmer turning up, the Prime Minister of England, turning up at COP saying, "Well, we've seen that the U.S. are now stepping back from taking in climate investment. We're open for business. Please come here." People are going to be stepping in and taking the space that is being left. It has been a tremendous driver of growth, a tremendous driver of competitiveness. What the CHIPS Act, what the bipartisan infrastructure bill, what the Inflation Reduction Act were all trying to do was it was large industrial policy, which was very much focused on trying to bring manufacturing jobs back to the US. And it was done through regulation. It was done through tax incentives. It was done through trying to promote US jobs. And so this is what it wasn't called the Green Growth Act. It was called the Inflation Reduction Act. There were pretty pragmatic motivations behind putting these institutions in place and these reforms in place. Also, if you have a look at, say, China, China has been like a champion in this area. It produced more solar than in last year than the US did in its entire history. Yeah. So in 1 year, India is now stepping up and so you've seen phenomenal growth in China. India have now proposed going even faster than China on its green growth. This is. When you talk about stepping back from green investments, this, to my mind, is only going to be leaving the US behind. It's going to be losing US jobs. It's going to be losing US competitiveness over time. I can't see it makes any great sense even in a US domestic context. But if you then take it into the broader kind of, which was part of your question, the broader climate change debate, for like the IMF has said, and various other people have come out and said, if you spend $1 now, it saves you $4 in the future of the cost of cleaning up and climate action. You also had the Stern Review going back a few years that said if you put in 1% of GDP now towards climate action, it'll save you somewhere between 5 and 20% of GDP in the future. So, on no sense and on no vertical, whether it's short term, whether it's competition, it's global competition, whether it's long term economic health, whether it's jobs, whether it's economic growth, I can't see any of this makes any sense at all. Like, and it also shows that the US is a big outlier. Like, most other countries in the world, and most of the developing countries that aren't entirely dependent upon fossil fuels, such as Saudi Arabia or Russia, are very much going down this agenda. So it's, to me, none of this makes sense.
All right, thank you so much, Christopher. All right, we'll take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll be sure to continue the conversation. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. So welcome back. You're still watching Policy on the Go on Green TV. We've been talking and tracking some of Trump's policies and reforms that are making very big waves on the international scale. And we've had quite very deep insights and perspective. It's been a very wonderful conversation. So I'll come to you now, Dr. Prachi. Let's look at one of the most recent things we've seen Trump do, and that was his plastic straw ban. And some experts have said that, of course, this decision is rather short-sighted, but by the President Donald Trump. And now some people have analyzed this, saying that one of this, all of these policies and these things that Trump is doing is an example that governments will not prioritize climate correction or global justice, considering the fact that the argument is that governments are only bothered because they're only trying to make a mark in their own specific term. Usually all over the world, governments are elected for just about 4 to 5 years and all of that. So the idea is that most governments are not bothered about climate issues or climate justice or climate correction because they're only trying to make a mark in their specific terms in office. And so usually decisions are rather short-sighted and based on what we can see them as. And, like Christopher also pointed to, trying to consolidate power. So do you agree with this, that this might be one of the reasons why we see some governments do this, including Trump? It could just be that Trump is only focused on making a mark during his time in office and is not bothered about, the ripple effect in the long run. Do you think that that's a position we can look through?
See, his rolling back of the single-use plastic is definitely a step backwards. I would very strongly say so. Why would I say so? Because the United States, President Trump, not United States, President Trump has always been a climate denier. He has always said that climate change is, there is nothing called as climate change. It is a false concept, and there is nothing happening in the world. He himself is witnessing all the effects of climate disasters and the crisis. Let's talk about the present California wildfires, which has happened in the United States just a fortnight back. So if we say so, rolling back the plastics and then talking about stating that we will not be taking care of the single-use plastics and all the fossil fuel industries will be working the way they are working, they used to work in the recent past, would be definitely a step backward. Why would I say so? Is that US has been the largest producer of the plastic waste, which turns out to be 42 billion tons annually. And we all know the studies say by 2050 the oceans will be filled with plastics more than it can accommodate the fishes. So if we take into account these kind of facts, we can very clearly and very easily say that rolling back single-use plastics would be a step backward, and it's further going to deteriorate the environment and the steps, the policies that have been taken up by the previous governments in terms of whether attaining sustainability, rolling back, or talking about completely banning single-use plastics, embracing sustainable measures of shopping and other practices. It would actually take back the entire ecosystem back to a very gruesome level or very very deteriorated level, which will not help the world at large. Stating that it's going to give the wildfires or the natural calamities even a boost, because the warming of the planet would be at a multifaceted level, which will not be in a position to take care of the curb as the country as a whole, as a world as a whole. Me being an Indian, we work or we talk as Vasudeva Kutumbakam when the world is one family. So if an action taken by one part of the family, it will take an impact on the rest of the family. So the world has to suffer, or world has to bear the brunt with what one nation or probably a certain section of the society is doing, and it is going to impact each one of us in one way or the other, whether it is a wildfire, whether it is a heat wave, whether it is a volcano, whether it is a glacier melt, you name it, and there will be the unprecedented ripple effect which is going to happen because of the rolling back of the single-use plastic. And it is going to disturb the ecosystem at a very, very large, to a very large extent, at a very unprecedented level, which will be in a very difficult state to curb or to become resilient to in the terms or in the future to come ahead.
All right, yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Prachi. Let me come to you now, Christopher, because you spoke a bit about the USAID and all of that. So I want to come to that particular topic. I'm looking at Trump's dismantling of the USAID. Of course, a lot of investigation has gone into it, into the agency, looking at the corruption allegations that have risen against the USAID. And some even say the aid is more of a tool for America's advantage rather than genuine support, you know. So some say the motive is not necessarily altruistic. So first of all, do you agree with that? And if so, or if you don't, because looking at those corruption allegations that have risen against the USAID, do you think that possibly Trump just might be doing the right thing, considering that he's challenging this traditional aid model? So, you know, of course, we're trying to look at it from both perspectives. So what are your thoughts on these allegations that have risen? And if this is the case, do you think Trump is doing the right thing, or what? In what better way should he approach this particular issue?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oof. As with a lot of things, the things I mentioned before with Donald Trump, there's a grain of truth amidst
Okay.
I don't know, the big lie, the big policy. So like he takes a little bit of justification and he uses that to blow up an entire system.
Okay.
I'm a wholehearted supporter of USAID, and I think that both things can be true at once. That it is an element of soft power, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. You know, it is something that if you just go back to the origin story of USAID, it's 1961. It was set up, and it was set up as a counterweight to the increasing influence of communism in the developing world. So
Yes.
president stood up and he said, "Well, what we need to be doing is we need to be reducing poverty. We need to be encouraging economic growth. We need to be encouraging stability, and all with the underlying premise of we want to support democracy." And a lot of good has come from that. So USAID is, well, up until recently, was in 100 countries. It was what was this? Got $40 billion a year. Like that's it's a very significant amount of money, and it has saved millions of lives. It has given HIV/AIDS treatments to millions of people. It has given millions of vaccines for malaria. It has done an awful lot of good in the world. Now, it is entirely altruistic. No, it isn't. But just because you're helping because you want to be increasing your soft power, that's I don't see that as a major issue. So you have the soft power because you're having the lines of communication, you're talking to people, you use those lines of communication and the access to then be talking about mutual benefit, to be talking about trade, to be talking about also about democracy, to be talking about all sorts of other things. It's a way of increasing your influence around the world without the use of military force, without just having the big stick and telling people to do things. So again, you do have the little bits of, so there are inefficiencies. Absolutely, there may be corruption. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But the thing to do, if you did genuinely believe that these things needed to be gone and fixed, what you do is you go to Congress and you say, we need to get legislation in here to go in and fix these things, to go in and do the investigations and to reform it. You don't just go and blow it up. If you're going to blow it up, it is political. It isn't economic. All you're doing is you're making a statement. You're not trying to fix the problem, because you end up throwing away all of the goods that came from USAID, from all of the influence that came from it, all of the benefits that goes to large parts of the world from it. And all you're doing is you're going to have desperate people who will be like who need aid, who rely on aid, looking elsewhere. So you have China stepping in. You'll have Russia stepping in. So the US will be giving up its soft power to its political rivals. Again, it makes, to my mind, it makes no sense on any level you look at it. Particularly not the humanitarian sense, which is, of course, the most fundamental, most important part of this. People will die as a result of this decision.
Dr. Prachi, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that as well. What better way do you think Trump could have approached this issue?
See, I largely I agree to what Christopher has said. I What I feel, it's going to worsen the food insecurity. It might further aggravate the poverty, and there will be a lot of problems when it comes to strategies on climate adaptation and mitigation policies relating to the same. So USAID, if that is being compromised upon, for the lack of a better word, it would really hamper the way we are approaching as one unit towards food security, towards
Mm,
cutting on the poverty side. And probably, what to my mind, the most important, or rather potent factor would be the adaptation and the mitigation strategies that have been agreed upon universally would to some extent get impacted, or may get halted for a period of time. And it would probably a very difficult phase to restart them, or to give them a
yeah,
new push once they've been halted for a fairly long
yeah.
time. Like, if we go the path wherein we say it is all about being in at the powerful stage, and you would like to refrain for some time, but you would like to go after a period of time, that will be a difficult, because once something is altered, the dynamics at the global level gets changed at a very rapid pace. So to keep
Sure.
the pace same and bring the USAID in concrete monetary terms would be a really challenging task to do. Why do I say that? Again, would be the world changes. We don't know once, if it is being halted for a period of time, and once it is restarted, what is the degree of, let's say, climate irregularities that has happened so far during that, between that period, and what is the
Mm,
level of damage that has been done within one nation or multi nations. If there is any kind of land extinction that has happened, or probably any species. So, see, the entire ecosystem is much interrelated. So, if there is a harm at one level, it will impact the other members of the ecosystem. So, to keep that in mind, I don't know, it will be a difficult, a challenging place to be at, wherein we are saying we are halting, or we are deregulating, or we are rethinking about the entire strategy or the framework, and then we will restructure and restart. So,
mm.
to my mind, yes, it's a very, very difficult space to be in, to be answering this particular question in a very black and white terms, because it has different layers attached to it and different ecosystems attached to it. To bring one concrete answer to this particular point would be really challenging on my
Yeah, all right. So I'm still with you, Dr. Prachi. Of course, with all of this that's happening, the urgency of the challenges, they will come with actions, and these actions demand a response from, of course, the rest of the international community. So some have suggested that international partners need to counterbalance Trump's unilateral moves that especially undermine the global environmental and humanitarian initiatives that you mentioned. So how do you think the international community can go about this to counterbalance this things that Trump is doing and these reforms that just might shake the global system?
See, one example I can very recently give you, as we are talking, France is holding up an emergency meet with respect to the Ukraine war. They want to discuss the entire landscape when it comes to emergency when it's a Ukraine war. USA is adopting a level of one particular strategy regarding it. USA is also adopting a strategy wherein India-Bangladesh relationships are going. So, one way of doing is to call those kind of, I will not call them an emergency meet, but I would definitely welcome the fact wherein the global leaders are taking initiative and meeting up and talking about it, because no solution can come till the time there is a discussion, a dialogue, or a brainstorming session that has happened over a given particular scenario. So, one particular, the first suggestion could be is having lateral dialogues at multi forums and multiple levels. Where I talk about multilateral dialogues at multiple forums at different levels. It will include global leaders also, but it includes diplomats and bureaucrats also, who are also flooded with the ideas regarding the same as to how you can curb the international the changes in the landscape that is happening in the present scenario. That can be the one of the very pertinent solution. The initiative has been taken up by the French president. It's a very nice initiative, one to have, wherein he wants to talk about the future course of action that he wants to take, or the other European nations who wants to talk about it. So this can be one. The other could be, I already mentioned, is the use of the soft power. We have to include representatives who are at the global level, who embrace soft power representatives, the representatives of the same, which can influence people to a very great extent, to a larger extent, and talk
Mm.
about or maybe discuss about, or probably be their voice of change, and what do the people at large think about, and bring those pointers in terms of the in front of that multilaterals, the global leaders, and then discuss amongst the nations. Those kind of solutions will also help in bringing, because the people at the front line are aware as to what kind of factors are impacting them more than the people who probably are sitting at the global level, probably who are not in a position to anticipate some kind of crisis that the people at the front line are facing. So this could be another factor. The third factor
Mm.
that I already have mentioned and also talk about it is the legal perspective. I don't know how far this can function for the
Mm.
lack of for the better lack of the understanding regarding the same, because a global landscape is very different. But still, there has to be a regulatory framework which talks about that the nations are need to should be doing this. Who would be doing this? International bodies, just as United Nations, would be a great example for the same, who talk about as to this is the way you need to function to bring about that kind of change within the landscape of the within the global landscape. So these could be another factors.
Mm.
Let's okay. Yeah, strengthening the multilaterals would be one of the major aspects in terms of wherein these multilaterals take initiatives and talk to nations at large. Sometimes talk to the people at the front line, and then come up with solutions and suggestions which can bring some change and can reduce the level of damage, make us more resilient.
Mm, all right. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Prachi. So just before we wrap up, one of the last things that I want to look at, I'll come to you, Christopher, in an egregious statement, as many has described it, Trump responding to the Gaza war, he also laid a very controversial proposal, and many have claimed that, no, first of all, the question I want to ask is, what do you think is his motive behind trying to own the Gaza Strip as he has proposed, and do you think it's best for Palestinians? So I want to hear your thoughts on that, Christopher. Looking at Trump's proposal in response to the war in Gaza, what do you think is his motive behind that? And do you think it could be the best for the Palestinians, looking that truly the land is in a very devastating state right now, and it really might be difficult to get it back up? So what do you think, what's your thought on that, first of all?
I think first thing to note on that is it's not happening. There's never
Mm.
any prospect. I don't think even he believed there's a prospect of this happening. Like when he says something as really just nuts as this, and you
Mm.
have the entire of the Arab world going seriously, and
Yeah.
and he makes the suggestion that, oh, don't worry, what will all of the people who were supporting Gaza, they should take in the Gaza refugees. So like Ireland and Portugal and whoever else should take in billions of refugees to clear it out for the US to turn it into the Riviera of the Middle East. It is completely and
Mm-hmm.
totally insane. It's fantasy land. But I believe like
Mm.
he understands it's fantasy land. Like it was a kind of a kernel of an idea that was thrown into a property developer's head by his son-in-law Jared Kushner back under his first term. Yeah, I'm sure it would be. I'm sure if you did develop it, it would be very, very beautiful. But it does not solve the problem that you've got millions of people there. It is their homes, and you cannot be moving millions of people out of their homes and hoping to house them elsewhere. It is nuts. It is inhumane. It will never happen. But I think that one of the main reasons he did it is what I was mentioning before. It's the flooding the zone. It's saying something else outrageous so that we're not talking about having, like, Pete Hegseth appointed as the head of the military, or having, Tulsi Gabbard or RFK Jr. being appointed to the head of health. You say these things so our attention is focused on Gaza. Our attention is focused on a fantasy, as opposed to looking at the very real changes and the power grabs and consolidations that are happening at home.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Christopher. Yeah. Okay. So we're wrapping up the program now, and we're still with you, Christopher. Analyzing all of these changes, what do you think needs to happen next? How can the global system address the social repercussions that will come with these Trump policies that not only harm the vulnerable population, but they also create repellent effects that drive further political instability on the global space? So just looking at all of this, what do you think needs to happen next to be better prepared, even in America, not just in countries outside America, because America also needs to be prepared. So what's the next step from all of this?
Yeah, well, I think as with major political shifts and events, vacuums happen. So, like, for example, in like Brexit in the UK, there was the UK leaving the European Union created opportunities for other people to step in. So Ireland, for example, was a massive, my home country was a massive beneficiary of that. It stepped in and it took away some of that space. I think that in the exiting of really the rules-based order, which is what President Trump is trying to do globally. You're stepping out of essentially trying to say they're going to be removing their funding towards various UN, health administrations, potentially even the UN itself. It's USAID, all of the green policies. It is entirely possible. Like, other people will step in. Other people see this as an opportunity to be trying to be making to be taking the benefits that the US had from there. I see President Xi Jinping has recently been having conversations with the Mexican president, having conversations with Trudeau up in Canada, has been kind of moving in as the US is alienating, friends and traditional allies. Those allies, as Dr. Pachi was saying, are coming closer. So you have President Macron, pulling together the kind of the European Union and UK friends to look at the Ukraine situation. Again, completely and totally insane that you should try and negotiate a peace settlement on the Ukraine without involving the Ukrainians. It's completely nuts. Or without involving the Europeans. It's completely nuts. But he's trying to do it because he's trying to do it with Saudi and with China. I don't know why, but yeah, that's his thing. I think the vacuum will be filled by other people going in, and hopefully it is. As more and more of these kind of slightly insane decisions happen, you've got a lot of very underqualified people going into very important roles. Things might start to break down in the US, and you might then see a change in Congress or in the House at the midterms in 18 months, 2 years. So it's a kind of like a 2-year cycle where we need to be holding on tight, and then hopefully at the end of that 2 years, you have a more of a science-based approach to coming out of the. So we just need to be doing our best to be consolidating, taking our friends closer, trying to form our own, maybe even kind of new groups and associations, and just trying to wait it out.
Thank you so much, Christopher, for really bringing so much raw perspectives and insight to the program. I really appreciate it. How about you, Dr. Prachia? Let's just also have your thoughts on that as well. What do you think needs to happen next as we prepare for these reforms that would, of course, they will keep rolling in? I'm sure he's not done yet. He's probably just getting started. So how can we stay better prepared through these times?
See, a lot of it has been answered by Christopher already. Adding to it would be how do I put it is that the future belongs to those who are ready to adapt. And though there has to be adaptation with leadership. Once we talk about adaptation with leadership, is yes, there are changes happening. The dynamics globally are changing, but how do we adapt? We need to be very flexible in our approach, figure out how do we find a way ahead which takes care of the resilience that we all are looking towards, looking forward to, and also see the changes that are happening in the global landscape is very individual perspective the leaders that are taking, and nobody can say that whether it is correct or not because it is a very individualistic perspective. He is looking at his own perspective, and based on the perspectives that he is envisioning, he is making the decisions. Some may say they are wrong, some may say they are right, and there are people who are standing in the middle of the entire road stating we don't know whether they're good, whether they're bad. But having said so, we really need to adapt all the changes that are coming into. I come from a nation wherein we adapt all the changes that are come, and then we move ahead, taking everyone along. So I would take the policy of what my leader of the state talks about: take everyone along, and then try to bring about change to make it more robust. It has to be a lot more inclusive in nature. When I say inclusive, take cues from the global dynamics and bring down to your own table. Once you take cues from the global dynamics and bring down to your own table, you first are in a position. Again, I come back to my first point. First, take care of the short term challenges. Only then you have a very robust foundation to bring about the long term changes. It starts from the very smallest of the particle to bring that atom into the existence. So start with the smallest, bring the change within your initial system dynamics, and then think of bringing change into the world at large. Once we do so and we make a future focused and a stable economy, when we say future focused and stable, it has to be our own first, taking care of all the changes and then bringing those changes to the global platform. I mean, individualistic perspective can work, but of course, it is a very short-term prerogative. But
Yeah.
it will leave that strong foundation for the long-term changes that any one of us sitting in the panel or any individual who is holding some kind of opinion regarding the same landscape would also agree to the point that you really need to have a very robust foundation, and only then you can bring about those kind of changes that you are envisioning in the future. It may be towards the economic deals, it may be towards the securing the lives of the people, it may be towards bringing about peace in the continent, in around the world. It may be towards the climate resilience. It may be about you may talk about and foreign policies or maybe economic policies. Any policy, it could talk about the sanctions, or it may talk about. I mean, you name it, and you may talk about it. But you really need to have that inclusive approach first of all, then bring that inclusive approach as to how you have fulfilled and successfully implemented on in your system, and then bring it at the global level so that people can take you from what you have done, and you have managed to adapt to the changes that have already been brought in at various levels by various governments, various multilaterals, anything. If that can be done, if the world or the changes that are coming every now and forth would be much easier for each one of us to embrace and work upon. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Prachi and Christopher. It's been a very interesting and wonderful conversation. Pleasure to have you both on the program. Without a doubt, Donald Trump's policies are putting the planet's climate stability and even the political space at risk, not just as a policy shift, but as part of a larger political strategy, like we've seen and heard our guests say, because it's prioritizing short-term gains over long-term survival survival. At a time when the earth itself is pushing back against decades of exploitation, these actions don't just weaken international cooperation, but they actively accelerate the crisis that we already face. Trump, like we've seen, is obviously emboldening polluters and undermining global momentum, and his decisions place billions of lives in jeopardy. Well, the fight is far from over, because the real question is not whether we can afford to act, it's whether we can afford not to act. You know, looking at the economic forecast predicting severe consequences for global stability, the world needs to respond with resolve. So this brings us to the end of the program. The question is, are you fearful or optimistic with the ongoing Trump reforms? Let's have more of your thoughts in the comments. Many thanks for watching. I'm Tonio Gubanjo. It's bye for now.